My personal history with the center, so I started 6 years ago as a volunteer, as a community facilitator or educator. I went out into high schools, alternate programs, youth drop-in groups, presenting an hour workshop called Reaching Out, Suicide Awareness and Response. It was a workshop basically teaching kids how to potentially identify someone who might be having suicidal thoughts and then connect them to resources, as well as introduce them to the crisis center and the phone line and the chats that they had available to them. I came to the crisis center as a volunteer teaching suicide prevention, inspired by my own story. When I was a teenager, I struggled with my own thoughts of suicide and depression, living in the closet in the middle of a wheat field. Maybe not such a bill, it was Winnipeg. But I came basically to help and do whatever I could to share my story and help someone that was in the classroom, because as I always said, I said if someone walked into my class when I was 15 years old and even mentioned depression or suicide, I probably would have got help a lot sooner than I did. As it happened, I was in my second year of university when I went back to see my high school counselor, because that was the only thing that I knew how to do at the time. Working at the, I was also going to mention too, after I moved to Vancouver, in my early 20s or after university, whenever I was on kind of reading my career blogs and things like that, there were so many stories of suicide over and over again. It just seemed that I felt like I had to do something. And so the workshops were a perfect fit to kind of go out and do that work with youth in the community. Working at the community level to inspire change is of critical importance to our work. An example of this is Safe Talk. I'm also a Safe Talk trainer, which is a program by LivingWorks. Safe Talk is a half-day training session, which introduces people, pretty much everyone, to identify people with thoughts of suicide, kind of pick up on those invitations, we call them, and connect them to resources or keep safe connections. Recently, the Crisis Center partnered with Community, with everyone here at the table here, to offer a Safe Talk to queer service providers, allies, as well as community members. We recognize the fact that suicide rates in the queer community are unacceptably high, that queer persons face a number of barriers, obstacles when trying to access help. And so we wanted to come together and really create a discussion to build a suicide-safer community, to meet and to talk and to kind of figure out what we can do as a community, as a group of people, to help prevent suicide in the future and to help reduce that stigma. To summarize, what is suicide prevention? It is many things. It is open and direct talk to reduce stigma. It's building our own resiliency to manage life's up and downs. It's working at the community level to address systemic issues relating to homophobia and gender identity. It's promoting life and making life worth living. I'm excited about this discussion. I'm excited about this panel and all the presentations that we're going to have this afternoon. I believe this is so important, so passionate about it, so important about just talking and bringing up the subject matter, taking it out of silence. Olivier organized a World Cafe last month, which was also amazing, where a whole bunch of professional and people from queer community, mental health service providers came together and just start asking the questions and start trying to find answers. Just a note about safety. Whatever talking about suicide, it is a sensitive issue. If it does trigger you, if anything comes up, self-care is of the utmost importance. If you need to step out, take care of yourself, please do. All of us will be here and around afterwards too if you want to touch base. The format, we're basically going to have each presentation, then we're going to save room for about 1 or 2 questions following each presentation, and then leave room at the end for a group discussion. All right, without further ado, introduce our first speaker, Olivier Ferlatte. He's a PhD, a postdoctoral fellow in School of Nursing at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. His research focuses on gay and bisexual men's social and health inequities. Olivier.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited that this year we have actually 2 sessions on mental health at the summit, and I'm happy to be part of one. Today, I'm going to talk to you about some work that I'm conducting with a colleague at the University of British Columbia, John Olive, to try to better understand what will it take to prevent suicide among gay, bi, and queer men. I don't think this group need any convincing about the importance of looking at this issue, But in case you're still doubtful, there's at least 50 empirical studies that have been published over the last 40 years that demonstrate that gay and bisexual men have an increased risk of suicide in comparison to heterosexual men. And generally, from systematic review, we would say that gay and bisexual men are 2 to 5 times more likely to report lifetime suicide attempts in comparison to heterosexual men. We also have some evidence of this disparity in Canada. David Brennan from the University of Toronto showed that gay men are 3.5 times more likely to have a history of suicidality in their lifetime compared to heterosexual men, and that bisexual men are 5 times more likely. Similarly, in data from Sex Now survey that I published with some colleague, we actually found that lifetime suicidality was much higher in our sample than it was in Brennan's study. We actually find that about half of gay and bisexual men have at least experienced suicide ideation. But I think the disturbing trend for us is looking in suicide ideation and attempt in the last 12 months. 1 in 6 gay and bisexual men say they've thought about ending their life in the last year, while 1 in 60 say they actually attempted within the last year. Well, there's an accumulation of data that show that this inequity exists. What has not been looked at by researchers as much is the factors that are sustaining this health inequities. And this gap in knowledge is really preventing the development of targeted intervention for suicide prevention for gay and bisexual men. So this is what we were trying to do with our research, is try to look at what are the factors that increase risk suicide among gay, bi, and queer men, and more importantly, what opportunities do we have to intervene and do prevention. So we did a study using photo voice, where participants take photographs to illustrate their experience in perspective. So we recruited 30 gay and bisexual men who were affected by suicide. About 2/3 were men who had personal experience of suicide, so they consider suicide or they attempted suicide. And another 1/3 were men who had lost another man to suicide, so often a lover's or a friend to suicide. And because suicide is a very difficult topic to talk about, we wanted to kind of create, to give people a medium that would allow them to express themselves more effectively. So we provided them with cameras, or they use their own camera. A lot of people have camera now just on their phone. And we asked them to just take a photograph over a 2-week period of time about their experience. So whether it was what triggered their suicide thought, what they felt caused their suicide thought, what helped them get better, or or just their thought on prevention. And the men that had lost someone to suicide, we also asked them to take the same photos about their friend or the lover that they lost to suicide, and also what they thought could have prevented it. And then with the photograph, people came and they presented it to a researcher in a one-on-one interview. And the fact of taking photos allowed the participant to choose which aspect of their life they thought was more meaningful, or which aspect they were willing to share. So what will it take? So now I'm going to present what we heard from gay and bisexual men about what will it take to prevent suicide among gay and bisexual men, and maybe some of those results will not surprise you. But in the main hypothesis and research for the elevated rate of suicide among gay and bisexual men reside in internalized homophobia. And therefore, the main answer would be to cure gay and bisexual men from their internalized oppression. In the narrative of the men that we interview and participate in our study, there was actually very little evidence that they had internalized homophobia. However, the majority who experienced suicidality had experienced high rate of violence related to their sexuality, which were directly or indirectly linked to their experience of suicide ideation. For example, this photo was taken by a young man in the Lower Mainland, and you see this lovely path, and he say, "It's the path of a trail I used to walk through quite a bit when I was younger. That was until one day I got jumped by a group of kids. There was a rumor going around that I was gay. One smacked me at the back of the leg with a little league bat, bringing me to the ground. and then the rest kicked, punched, and spat on me for several minutes, all while yelling various hateful slurs. I spent most of the summer in bed, too depressed and sore to do much. Another thing that we heard from gay and bisexual men is the importance of breaking social isolation due to their sexuality, but often also due to other social location they had, such as being HIV positive or suffering of mental illness. A lot of the men that we interview suffer from deep social isolation, which was linked to their suicide ideation or attempt. So the man who took this photo was a man in his 40s, and he took this photo of his phone, and it's 5 p.m. on the phone. The phone hasn't ring all day. Nobody has called, nobody has texted, and that's what he says. I titled this, "Is This Working?" Because one of the things that I find very hurtful is that my cell phone sometimes never rings. Like, no one phones me. Like, do people care about me, or am I alone in this world? Gay and bisexual men are not a homogeneous population, and we need to take into account intersection of identities, including class. This photo of a mailbox was taken by a man in his 40s who had recently lost his employment, and he described that when he was opening the mailbox, he could see all those bills piling up, bills that he was unable to pay, and he said, "That's the mailbox, and it's full of mail, usually bills, unfortunately. It's a giant feeling of negative emotion. I hate going there. I hate looking inside. I hate seeing what it is. It brings very few good news. It's usually bad news." A lot of the men that we interview in the context of our study did struggle with poverty or finding stable employment. And that was often related to their sexual identity. Many of them, because they experienced homophobia in school or in the small town that they were from, they stopped going to school at an early age, which impacted their capacity to find stable employment. Also, I think it's important to take into relationship issue with race. We had 3 Asian participants in our study who described how conflict between their Asian and gay identity was related to their suicide ideation. Similarly, we had 3 participants who were Aboriginal men who experienced high level of violence because of the processes of colonization, particularly due to the erasure of Two-Spirit men within their Aboriginal community through the processes of colonization, which led them to experience high level of violence on and off reserve. One of them, who went to residential school, took this photo, and he described, "I was a proud Two-Spirit Aboriginal who was raised traditionally, surrounded by community support and love in my younger years. However, the older I got, the abuse worsened, which led to self-hate, which turned to withdrawal, and the start of many attempts to end the inner suffering." Also, I want to emphasize that for the Aboriginal participant in our study, going back to their tradition and connecting to their Aboriginal culture was often a way to heal themselves from the violence as well. Also, I don't want to paint just a very negative portrait of the men that were part of our study. While a lot of them experienced high degree of violence and trauma and abuse, a lot of them find very creative way to cope with stigma and manage their suicide thought, whether it was by playing with gender role, connecting to their community, doing drag, taking care of a pet or a friend, or engaging in art, or volunteering for the gay community. So what can we do to help foster this resiliency that exists within the gay and bisexual men community to prevent suicide? One of the things that we also heard a lot is about the importance of breaking silence around suicide. A lot of the men that participated in our study described how they felt they were very alone and that they thought they were the only person in the whole world having those thoughts of hopelessness and thinking about suicide. And they described the need to talk about suicide in the gay and bisexual men community and in society in general. So right now, we are actually using the photograph of the participant we put together an exhibit that's open to the public as a way to break the silence around suicide and invite people into a conversation about what we can do to better support gay and bisexual men that are affected by suicide and how we can prevent death by suicide. And along with the another way that we're trying to break this silence is 5 of the participants of the study also collaborated with a visual artist to create an art piece to destigmatize suicide and also tell their story. And I want to share with you a short video that we did of one of the participants.
Once I left high school, I was struggling with just immense depression and anxiety. And when you get to a point like that, I guess you get desperate and you look for any way to relieve that.
And how often did you cut yourself when things were bad?
Anywhere from 20 to 50. More.
The Man Up Against Suicide project, this part of it is to work with gay and bisexual men who have struggled with depression and suicide or have lost a male in their lives to suicide. My job is to help facilitate and to create an art piece that helps tell their story. I think this as a cluster is nice because it almost looks like a bracelet.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And then up here, let's mix these up. Jason's experiences as a young man, as a boy, are horrific.
I was born in Fernie, British Columbia, which is a small town by the BC-Alberta border. It was about around grade 5 where I noticed that I was having feelings towards boys. My classmates started teasing me, calling me names. Everyone throws the term bullying around like it's a common thing and that it's something that everyone experiences. But what they don't realize is that, you know, if you're being beaten up constantly, sexually assaulted, that's just plain criminal abuse. The cutting was never about dying. I never ever wanted to die. But when I started cutting, it relieved a lot of the pain and suffering. It was kind of like being on medication. Neil told me that he just expected to come home and find me dead.
And Neil's been with you for how many years?
Next year will be 20 years.
Wow. So you've been through a lot together.
Yes.
What do you think? Art does open up dialogue and makes people feel comfortable to talk about something that is very difficult to talk about.
When I first met him, of course, I saw the beauty in him right away, but I also saw the challenge and the pain in his eyes. So to watch him blossom like this now is just an amazing thing. The courage to do this, particularly this topic, suicide with gay men, is just it's something we don't talk enough about. So I'm so proud of him right now.
I'm so happy. Everyone I invited came and they're proud of it. And I didn't think it would be so impactful. And I don't think it took bravery. I just feel that's something I had to do.
As disturbing as the stories are, I think projects like Man Up Against Suicide help. We need to talk about it. And if we can do that through art, we can actually open up our audience, and it just creates an atmosphere where people can actually talk about something that is very difficult.
video. It's gonna end. Okay. Love music. So right now you can come and see Jason's piece along other artists who are affected by suicide, along with the photo at Gallery Gachet. We had the opening last week, and the uptake has been amazing. A lot of people have come and see the pieces and feeling very empowered about having a conversation around suicide. And the gallery is open every day from 12 to noon until this coming Sunday. But if you need another reason to come to the space, we are hosting the Men's Health Research Program in collaboration with the Health Initiative for Men, a mental health mingler in the space, and that will give you a chance to come and see the gallery. And if you need one more reason, there'll be free wine, so you can come for the free wine. But if not, for this very important conversation that what we need to have around suicide in the gay and bisexual men community. We also publish a book of stories and also photograph of the participants. So if you would like a copy, I have some. It's not mandatory, but if you want to make a $10 donation, we are trying to bring this exhibit to other places in the country, and we're actually planning to bring it to Nanaimo, Whistler during Whistler Pride in Toronto. So if you can help us support bringing this work elsewhere, you can. But if you just want a copy of the book, I'll give it to you as well. And if you're planning to be there tomorrow at the Mingler, wait until then, because I have more copy at the gallery than I have right now with me. And I just want to thank you for your time, and thanks the participant who shared their story, and my colleague, the Men's Health Research Program. And also, if you want to see some of the photographs, they are on our website. And this is my contact information. And I want to say thank you to the people that pay me to do this work, UBC and the Movember Foundation. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for one or two questions. Does anyone have a question for Olivier on the study or about the photos?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mohammed. Great presentation and great research. I really liked your approach to this. This might be a random question, but it just popped out in my mind, and given your expertise with the area, I was wondering when the data you presented in your background about the comparisons you made, it was looking at suicide for gay men against heterosexual men. I was wondering if you have anything on this ratio when you compare it to lesbian communities. Is it less of an issue in those communities? And then if that's the case, then why do you think we're seeing that? Or is there anything we could learn from the interventions that have addressed suicide among lesbian communities?
Yeah, I think, my research focused only on gay and bisexual men, but I think it should have, we could probably like go beyond gay and bisexual men, because we know suicide is a issue that affect the entire like LGBTQ2S community. Rates are particularly high among two-spirit men and particularly among transgenders. So I think it is an issue of sexual minority and not just an issue of gay and bisexual men. Unfortunately, the context of my work does not cover the whole spectrum, and unfortunately there's not a lot of research on suicide among gay and bisexual men, but it's even worse when we look at particularly queer women.
Excellent.
Oh, Philip. It's going to be a hard question, I know that.
Is the Mingler tonight or tomorrow night?
The Mingler, did I say it was tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, it's tomorrow. It's Thursday. It's in the program.
Okay, but I have another question too.
Today, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. It is tomorrow. Thank you for asking that. You can go to the gallery tonight. The exhibit will be there, but the wine won't be there. And I won't be there, but it's tomorrow.
So I feel like the issue of suicide has been talked about a lot in terms of LGBT communities, often focusing on youth. So I think that's where a lot of attention goes, and it's kind of like, let's take care of youth So there's sort of the youth sympathy, which I, obviously have a lot of sympathy for. And the issue of adult sort of suicide in the LGBT communities hasn't really been talked about much. And so it feels like it's not much on the radar. So that means there's probably not a lot of interventions that are targeted towards this population. So given that there's folks here interested in, gay, bi, men's health, et cetera, what kind of interventions do you think, or have you seen, or would you even just sort of like suggest are worth exploring? Like, what's your what are your thoughts on that?
I just want to respond to your point, and it's true that I think the whole issue about youth, and if you go to the PHAC website, they talk about where the Public Health Agency, they talk about which group are at higher risk of suicide, and they mention queer youth, but on the inequity doesn't go away with adulthood, and it's important to think about what we can do to support adults struggling with suicide. There are more queer adults that die from suicide than there are youth. And I think in terms of intervention, it's very hard. We had this World Cafe recently, and working with people from the Mental Health Commission, there's not a single jurisdiction in the world that has implemented a strategy for LGBTQ suicide. So that hasn't been done. But I think, there are probably some intervention that we are having, and I think, on the field that are maybe not thought about suicide prevention, but may have an impact on suicide prevention. So there are intervention, we can think about the work of Totally Outright, about breaking social isolation, bringing people together, building social network, or the work at HIM, when I hear the work of, and Aaron's going to talk about this, the number of clients that come to their counseling program who reported suicide ideation prior to coming to see a counselor is very high. So we can think, and unfortunately they receive very little funding to support that counseling program. So I think we need different level of intervention, from looking at structural, looking at how we can prevent, looking at structural issue, but also looking at how we can better support people who have suicide ideation. That include perhaps community level counseling. A lot of people that have interviewed had actually very horrific experience going to hospitals, and so this is a place they don't really want to access services. So I think we need a huge strategy, and we're just kind of in the beginning of thinking about this. And I think it's about different levels, from building community to doing primary prevention to also the whole discussion of postvention. So we know that people are more likely to, one of the risk factor for a suicide attempt, for dying from suicide, is a previous suicide attempt. So what do we do to support people that have previous suicide attempt as well? And I think Travis is going to touch a lot on the issue of what kind of do you touch that? A bit. Sorry, false plug.
I think that the other thing that provincially happening in this province is the Canadian Mental Health Association is partnering with organizations like the Crisis Centre to roll out a fairly significant training program that will empower individuals and groups within the communities to provide what is it, 200,000? Is that the goal, Travis? Mm-hmm. Do you recall? Yeah, so 200,000 people. 20,000, sorry. Yeah. We're training all of Metro Vancouver, downtown. Anyways, so there are things happening, and we will talk probably a little bit more about some of our collaborations at the end and how we're looping ourselves into those conversations to make sure that there's guidance for gay male-specific populations as well. But there is some stuff happening that's really, really fascinating that looks more like an intervention, but from a midstream perspective. Yeah.
But I think just breaking the silence and bringing this issue forward as something that's happening in our community, because since I've started doing this work, a lot of gay men that are connected to this work were like, oh, I didn't realize it was an issue for gay and bisexual men and adult. And I think just kind of like this lack of knowledge and that it's happening in our community at a higher rate is kind of is a basic intervention that we need to do so people can be like alert to, their friends or community member that are thinking about suicide. And I'll leave it to my next presenter.
All right. Thank you very much, Olivier.